never said I oppose fracking. Show the tape. Put it on your website. Put it on the website.
Live from Clark Studios in Rochester, New York. Broadcasting around the world. You're listening to You Made It Political, where the voice of the keyboard warrior is finally heard and the arguments presented are put to the political test. And now, here's your host, Matt Clark.
Hypocrisy is at an all-time high once again, while the left continue to chastise the right for exercising their First Amendment rights. They have made it apparently clear that violence is only acceptable if conducted under the control and rule of the Democratic Party. But the insanity of all it is that nobody seems to even question it. No one seems to challenge the double standards. And now our own Republican leaders are telling the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ted Cruz to tone down the rhetoric. While the Democrats in the Biden administration continue to shame conservatives for attending a few Trump rallies, what they so conveniently fail to mention is that left-wing protests are still going on as we speak, and that in Portland alone, they have caused roughly $2.3 million in damage to federal buildings since they broke out over the summer. But who cares, right? We got a few broken windows at the Capitol to fix. Let's head over to Facebook, and where we discuss the hypocrisy of it all and the continued double standards brought to you by the left. So left-wing protesters in Portland, for those of you who don't know, they're still going on even today after Biden's been sworn in. So it wasn't really Trump's fault. It didn't really have to do with Trump in the first place, because they're still going on. Left-wing protests in Portland have caused roughly $2.3 million in damage to federal buildings since they broke out over the summer. Now, this is according to the local media. So they've obviously reached out and said, hey, can we have a grand total here on the damage done? Because all we hear lately is Trump supporters or the Republican Party get shamed for rioting at the Capitol during a one-time event over a few broken windows. So the whole country, or at least the Democratic Party, have gone completely mental and mad over the fact that there's been a few broken windows at the Capitol Hill building. So Fox News decided to reach out to the local media and say, hey, let's see how much damage has really been done by the left, because CNN certainly isn't been reporting on it. So $2.3 million. So what exactly has been damaged? Let's take a look. Portland riots caused at least $2.3 million in damage to federal buildings in the city, says the state's U.S. attorney. So what exactly have they been up to in Portland? Because like I said, CNN has gravely failed to inform us all. How convenient. They keep leaving out the fact that the left continue to riot. Now remember, they've been rioting for months here. They've been rioting since the summer. I don't care what group you want to pin to these riots. The fact of the matter is, whether it's the left, BLM, Antifa, I don't care what you call, but they're all affiliated and they all get lumped into one category, the left. So they've all been rioting for months now. They've accumulated millions, if not tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, possibly throughout the entire United States in damage. We're talking about Portland, one city alone, $2.3 million in damage. Now, what I find laughable about the entire situation is that it's been done to federal buildings. Remember the January 6th Capitol attack? Obviously, how can we forget it? How much attention it got for it being a federal building. Remember, we were told, oh, wait, but this is different because this is a federal building we're talking about. Nobody damaged federal buildings in other cities, like we did to the Capitol building, well, yes, they have. And they continue to do it today. And they have stormed other federal buildings, which we'll get into in just a second. So the double standards is at an all-time high. We see right here that Oregon's largest city saw more than 2 months of near nightly unrest. We're talking 2 months of near nightly unrest here. What happened a few weeks ago, violence is violence at the end of the day. All violence is bad. It doesn't matter whether it goes on for 10 minutes or 10 months. Violence, we can all agree on, is not acceptable by any means. But where I have a problem is the double standards, the ongoing hypocrisy of it all. That's where I get extremely upset, and I defend the right for the violence. Because as long as the left isn't going to condemn it, well, then apparently it's open game for everybody. And as we can see right here, Oregon's largest city, Portland, saw more than 2 months of near nightly. So every single night, this unrest is going on. And the attacks have been at a federal courthouse downtown. To me, a government building is a government building. Attacking the government, whether it's a federal courthouse or the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., to me, is exactly the same thing. You can't tell me that it's okay for the left to attack a little courthouse in Portland, Oregon, but you shame the right for doing the exact same thing in Washington, D.C. And before you tell me, well, people died at the Capitol building, which is extremely sad in its own right. And I am apologetically sympathetic towards the families of the officers that died. There's a funeral going on today, right now, in Washington, D.C. for an officer that passed away. And it's a very sad thing for any officer to die in the line of duty. But a tremendous amount of officers died on both sides. And that's what I have a problem with, that we are only highlighting those who died. I mean, the media won't shut up about it. They've constantly brought it to our attention that officers died, people died during the Capitol building attack. But they don't talk about all the men and women, the officers who died during all of these other attacks. And that's what I have a big problem with. So we have months and months of unrest. Protesters have rallied. This is the latest thing. Protesters have rallied near the Mark O. Hatfield U.S. courthouse in the city almost every night for weeks, feuding with police and counter-protesters and prompting the Trump administration to send federal officers to fortify the building after repeated vandalism. So this was all going on. A lot of this started while Trump was in office. It continues on today. And as you can see here, left-wing riots, they rattle U.S. cities even after President Biden's inauguration. So the riots are continuing. The nightly standoffs with police involved graffiti, broken windows, firecrackers, Molotov cocktails. The cleanup at the courthouse alone, and four other government buildings, mind you. Okay, so we're not just talking one building here. We're talking several buildings have cost over $2 million in damage. This is going to cost the taxpayers a tremendous amount of money to clean up damage that most people had nothing to do with, that a bunch of hooligans have conducted. So you've got the U.S. Attorney for Oregon, Billy J. Williams, told Oregon Live, and the total could continue to rise with repairs still underway. So here's the other damaged buildings that the left continue to destroy. The Edith Green, Weldon Wyatt Federal Building, the Gus Solomon U.S. Courthouse, the Pioneer Courthouse, and the city's U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Building. So, although the riots were ostensibly against the Trump administration, police brutality and racial injustice, they continued even after President Biden took office on January 20th. Yet we don't hear a single thing about any of this. Fox News seems to be the only one saying, hey, can we discuss the fact that this is going on both sides here? Can we discuss the fact that riots continue today? How about Portland defund the police? They all we hear is defund the police. Homicides are up 100%. Gun shootings are up 50%. Things are out of control in this city. Democratic run, of course, but nobody wants to talk about it. No one is discussing the fact that Antifa marchers have blasted the new president and the new Biden graffiti as new Biden, anti-Biden graffiti has emerged. But we don't hear anything about it. So it wasn't a Trump situation. And that's what I find so interesting about the whole thing. This whole thing was never about Trump. It wasn't outrage towards conservatives. It was just a bunch of hooligans destroying America, anti-Americans, destroying cities to show the rest of the country that they don't like what's going on in general, which is obviously no excuse for their actions. But this is what they're fighting. This is what they're arguing. This is what they're vandalizing city after city after city over. What may have started during the BLM movement has now been carried on, and we don't see any signs of it slowing down. Biden can't even go on camera himself and condemn the violence. All we've heard is from the secretary or the speaker. All she's come out and discussed it on his behalf. So we still have not had any political or senior politicians on the left come out and condemn any of this. It just continues to be swept under the rug. And this is why conservatives and Republicans are furious with the entire situation. So let's head over to the keyboard warrior cam and see what the American people have to say about the double standards and the complete hypocrisy of the ongoing violence conducted and committed by the left. So as you can see here, left-wing protesters in Portland have caused roughly $2.3 million in damage to federal buildings since they broke out over the summer, according to the local media. Helen says, I wholeheartedly blame the left. I feel we, the people, should bring charges of impeachment on them and make the left pay restitution for damages that impacted local businesses and families. I also feel that they should pay the families personal damages fees, personal damage fees, for the impact that it has caused due to make them feel insecure in their own towns and homes. I absolutely agree with that. I do. The left need to pay for this. They promoted and encouraged the damage. Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi, Ilhan Omar, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Biden himself, Kamala Harris. Instead of raising money to pay for damages, they were raising money to bail out criminals. Why aren't we discussing this today? Why isn't CNN highlighting the fact, or any other liberal left-wing media highlighting the fact that this is happening on both sides? Because they won't. They need to paint the left as if there are saviors to all the wrongdoing in America. The funny thing is, they're the only ones doing all the wrongdoing. And that is what is so laughable about this whole situation, that they keep putting themselves up on this pedestal to then shame the right over actions that they're conducting themselves on an ongoing basis. So they're screaming at the right for a little bit of violence while they continue to conduct violence day after day after day. So they brought this upon themselves. They've destroyed and damaged buildings all over the country. They better not pass a bill down to those residents. They need to pay for this themselves. Take it out of the Democratic National Committee for all I care. use the funds that they raise from BLM to now go around and fix all these cities up? Why should the damages be paid for by taxpayers? Innocent bystanders who had nothing to do with this BS movement, had nothing to do with any of the Antifa anti-American violence. So why should they now get the bill? The left should pay for this. Or how about this? How about we give Democrats the tax bill? We make them come up with the money to pay for all the damages. So if you're registered as a Democrat in cities where the damage was conducted, congratulations, here's the bill. You take care of it because you supported the violence. I think that's fair, and I think it's a great comment. I think they absolutely should have to take care of the damage themselves, as well as fees for the impact that it has caused due to making them feel insecure in their own towns and homes. Connie says, arrest them all and then put them to work fixing everything. That's a good idea. How about the Democrats get out there and do some community service now? Remember, you guys were okay with this. You applauded it. You cheered it all summer long. So you now get out there and start fixing up the buildings. Anybody who was involved, I'd like to see them all sentenced to community service. I don't care what their cause was. Was the Capitol building protests not for a cause? Funny how we pick and choose which cause is worth exercising our freedom of speech with. A cause is a cause. It's not up to anybody to tell me if my cause is more important than your cause. If I believe I have a right to fight for something, who are you to tell me that what I'm fighting for is not as important to what you're fighting for? And that's exactly what's just happened. The left have told us, they have told us that we had no right to exercise our First Amendment rights, our freedom of speech, to raise our concerns, to voice our concerns, that we feel there should have been a little bit more of a fair trial in regards to the 2020 presidential election. We feel the integrity of the electoral process is in jeopardy, and we'd like to voice our concerns over how to make it right in the future. Oh, but no, we're not allowed to talk about it because there was no fraud. Well, there were witnesses, there were testimony witnesses, there was evidence of fraud. The fact that nobody wanted to hear it is neither here or there, but there was actually evidence. So it didn't get heard. We felt that we were being silenced. We felt that our First Amendment rights were getting trampled on. So we went to a rally. We decided to march to the Capitol Hill and protest. But apparently that's not okay. Why? I have no idea, because nothing that happened that day has not happened in any other protest on the left for months and months previously. So I guess protesting is only okay as long as Biden and Kamala Harris tell you it's okay. That seems to be the new way in America. If the left don't give their stamp of approval, it's not allowed. The Constitution now only adheres to the left, at least some parts of it. They'll tell you what parts you're allowed to use, when and where, depending on what your narrative is. So Connie says, arrest them all and then put them to work fixing everything. Their sentences should be 40 hours per week of hard labor for the city until all buildings, federal, state, and private, parks, roads, and anything else they touch are restored. No bailouts from Kamala Harris. Charity-based charities, make them pay for their poor behavior. That's true. Nope, Kamala, you do not get to go raise a GoFundMe account this time. As a matter of fact, she should also get hit personally. Not out of taxpayers, not out of GoFundMe accounts. They all should come up with the money themselves. It's a great comment. Ralph says, you mean the protests that the Democratic leaders in this country supported and encouraged by giving them their blessing? You remember? Democrats said they needed a place to vent and act out their frustrations, and that the looting, destruction, and damage are all insured, right? And then those same Democratic leaders, Kamala Harris, your new VP to name one, paid to have them bailed out, only to have them go back onto the streets so they can continue their destruction. I mean, it's all over the news right now. The same criminals who Kamala Harris or funds that she's organized have bailed out not once, not twice, but 3 times have ended up back in prison. So clearly, we're sending a message to the hooligans, to the rioters, to the looters, that it's okay to commit the violent acts that you're causing right now. We'll bail you out. Don't worry. We're behind your cause all the way. But not the right. The right's not allowed to stand up for what they believe, because we don't have Republican Party political leaders on our side giving us their blessing, which is also becoming extremely frustrating in its own right. And it's to the point now where we don't even know if most of these Republican leaders are even on the same side anymore, because every time I turn on the news, another one seems to be joining the conservative shame game bandwagon. So we don't know who to trust anymore. We don't know what Republicans are truly on the side of the Republican Party or who's a closet Democrat, because there seem to be a lot more rhinos joining the list today, and it's all because of votes. Don't think for 2 seconds they've had a change of heart. Mitch McConnell goes where the votes go. Liz Cheney will go where the votes go. Ted Cruz goes where the Constitution goes. And that's the difference. There are Republicans who will fight to defend the Constitution. Ted Cruz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, a handful of others. And then there are Republicans who fight to defend their votes. And that's what it comes down to a lot of the rhinos. Where the votes go, they go. Look at Romney. He's a perfect example. They hate him in Utah. I don't know many Republicans who like him. He seems to think that the rhino vote is going to be what gets him to the presidential election in 2024. He seems to think that if I play the rhino card, that maybe there's going to be more rhino Republicans than conservative patriots. So he didn't have a change. It's not like Romney had an epiphany and he said, I need to stand up for what's right. Because the conservatives already did that. They already stood up for what's right. But Romney thought, you know what? I'm going to play the game here a little bit and go against them and see if I can win the other half votes. It's all strategy and complete nonsense from people like Mitt Romney and now Mitch McConnell and others, Liz Cheney, and everyone else who's deciding to vote for the impeachment against Trump because their votes are more important to them than standing up and defending the Constitution, which they took an oath for. And they're going to abandon all of that for votes. Let's go back to the Keyboard Warrior cam and see what other Keyboard Warriors have to say here about the insanity of the double standards and the hypocrisy of the left. Stephanie says, and you should check into Feinstein, Waters, Schiff, Zuckerberg, Newsom, Pelosi, Bezos, Sundaram in California, criminal records. They all have multiple criminal records or warrants, but I can't access them with buying them. Shouldn't this be public access, or without buying them? Shouldn't this be public access for anyone? It's true. These guys all have criminal records. They all have criminal records. They're all in office right now. And nobody wants to talk about it. We're only going to talk about how Trumpers and conservatives need to be deprogrammed. That's all anybody wants to seem to talk about. Kevin says, hand the bill to the city of Portland. They allowed it to happen. Even better, let Portland turn around and sue Antifa and BLM for the damages they encouraged, because they were far more responsible for what happened in that city and others than Trump was for what happened to the Capitol building. And we see the liberal left trying to make him responsible for those incidences. Why aren't we impeaching Pelosi? Why aren't we impeaching Kamala Harris? Where is the Republican leadership right now when we need them? Why do I feel like we are being completely walked all over? We don't have anybody who is really standing up and fighting back. All I hear is AOC run her mouth all day long. She runs her mouth. The squad runs their mouth. They run their mouth so loud that even Biden bows down to them. Yet we don't have anybody on the right who's doing the same thing. We have a few rising stars. Lauren Burbert from Colorado. She's loud. Matt Gaetz, he's loud. There's a few that are starting to come up and voice their concern. Ted Cruz and others. But it's not enough. The Republican Party right now is very weak. They are very weak. They're getting walked all over. And this is why we continue to see the left get away with their shenanigans and their nonsense. And it's going to continue until we vote out the washed up Republican leadership, starting with Mitch McConnell and Mitt Romney. That'd be a great start. We turn things around just getting rid of those two. So this leads me to my next point. We have a very serious situation here. Republican leadership is failing us. And now we've got Marjorie Taylor Greene under fire. Senator Mitt Romney said Tuesday that his party should rid itself of lawmakers like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene as House GOP leaders face pressure from their Senate colleagues to figure out a way to handle the audacious freshman Congresswomen. Notice how it's always the freshman Congresswomen that everybody wants out. It's because the freshman Congresswomen have the guts to speak up and stand out against the insanity of what's going on in Washington right now. All the freshmen, why is it okay for freshman Congresswoman AOC to run her mouth all day? Nobody seems to attack her for all of the ridiculous statements that she's made. She's thrown Pelosi and Schumer under the bus multiple times. A few months ago, she came out and said, yeah, we should probably replace them at some point. She didn't say that exactly, but we know that's what she meant. Yet we don't see her party turning on her for insubordination. All we see is every time a Republican freshman wants to get loud because they can't believe the senior leaders are acting so callous and are allowing the party to fracture even further, they're saying this is not right. This is not how we defend the Constitution. This is not how we defend our constituents that voted for us. So they make a little bit of noise and nobody likes that. So now the Democrats say, you know what? Marjorie Taylor Greene's starting to pose or be a little bit of a threat to us. We got to get her out now. Another thing that I don't understand is why is the Democratic Party even discussing this? The people voted for these politicians, and I think the Biden administration has forgotten that. I think they've forgotten the fact that we actually vote for these people. So you're not her boss, okay? Technically, we're her boss, or those who voted for her, depending on what state you're in. But when I vote for somebody and he or she goes to bat for me, I don't care who likes it or doesn't like it, because I voted for that person. The majority voted, and the majority did vote for her, and she won by a landslide. So now she's under fire, under attack, because she's getting a little bit too aggressive for the Democratic boots. And who cares what she said? She defended Trump and his right to go up against or have a fair trial for the fraud that allegedly occurred during the election. She spoke out against it. She defended it. She has some other ideas that she's come out with. And regardless of the fact that some, like Romney, might think her views or ideas are a little bit too wacky for the party, that's neither here or there. She has the right to speak. She has the right to defend herself. It's not up to anybody to tell you can agree or disagree with her, but it's not up to you to say, hey, your ideas are getting a little bit too far right now, or these ideas are a bit too extreme for us. First of all, who's us? Remember, she does not have to answer to you, Romney. She answers to her constituents, the ones who voted for her. So this is where I'm having a huge problem right now with politics, is they seem to have forgotten who their boss is. Pelosi and Schumer, they're not Green's boss. She does not have to answer to them. They did not hire her. She's not their employee. So let's see exactly what happened here. So we've got Marjorie Greene under attack. For her extremist views. She's now going to be sitting in front of a committee. We'll break down the article for you and take a look. Romney says GOP must distance from wacky weeds like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. He says our big tent is not large enough to both accommodate conservatives and kooks. It's not really a fair statement. I don't think it's up to Mitt Romney to decide how wacky her ideas are. So Senator Mitt Romney said Tuesday that his party should rid itself of lawmakers like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene as House GOP leaders face pressure from their Senate colleagues to figure out a way to handle. Can you believe this? We need to figure out how to handle Marjorie Taylor Greene, the audacious freshman congresswoman. Who's handling AOC? Who's handling Ilhan Omar? Since when is it anybody's right to handle these people? This is not high school. This is not, forget high school. They're acting like they're in middle school right now. Marjorie Taylor Greene is not a middle school student that is supposed to just sit there and be quiet. And if she gets too loud, gets sent to the principal office. This is what this actually feels like right now. And I feel like every time any of the Republicans speak out of line, I should say, they are chastised for it. They are shamed for. He goes on to say, I think we should have nothing to do with Marjorie Taylor Greene and think we should repudiate the things she said and move away from her, says Romney. Again, why is that Romney's choice? So now he's got the Democrats all fired up to go up against her. Greene, a Trump loyalist who in the past has expressed support for QAnon. Listen, regardless of what you think about QAnon, it doesn't matter. QAnon is information. Maybe conspiracy theory, it may be extreme information. If she wants to defend QAnon, that's her own right. There's a lot of people who follow Q. Whose right is it to say that Q poses a growing headache for a GOP looking to distance herself from President Trump's unproven election fraud claims? If she wants to follow a little bit of what Q says, just like millions of other Americans have, that's her own right. She has every right. And if she wants to echo some of these theories, that's her right, no matter how outrageous they might be. It doesn't matter. I don't care if she is convinced that aliens live with her and pitch a tent in her backyard. It's her right. If people want to believe that, great. If they don't, they don't. But we're trying to silence these people. Silencing seems to be the norm now, if you haven't noticed. It's getting to the point now where soon we're not even going to have a First Amendment right. And it all started with the stamp of approval by Twitter when they got rid of the president. It upset the Republicans. The Democrats couldn't have sing their praises enough over it. But the Republicans didn't fight back. They didn't shout about it. They just kind of let the social media platforms walk all over any Republican who wanted to speak out against the left's agenda. So this is where it started. They've silenced Trump, then they started silencing a whole list of other Republican leaders. Then they silenced an entire platform, Parler. One by one, the whole thing got shut down. So now they're trying to cancel politicians. They're now, as if it wasn't enough to silence Trump, they now want to silence every single politician who defends him while they continue their violence and their looting and their destruction of America, while they continue to worry about illegal immigrants. They want to silence people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ted Cruz for defending what Trump fought for defending what conservatives continue to fight for. So the whole thing is complete hypocrisy. It started with Q. She backed up Q. Now she's disavowing the QAnon conspiracy. But she's made a few other alleged statements. So for those of you who aren't following the whole Marjorie Taylor Greene situation, last summer in an old social media post, she also alleged that the 2018 Parkland school shooting, if we all remember that, the Parkland school shooting that killed 17 students in Florida, was staged. That was her opinion. She thought it was staged and that the 9/11 attacks were a hoax. There's a lot of people who think the 9/11 attacks were a hoax. There's a lot of people who think the Parkland school shooting was staged. They have a right to think whatever they want to think. If they have done their own research and they came to that conclusion, it's their own right. You don't have to believe them. She has also liked social media posts that called for violence against prominent Democrats, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. I don't see any harm in that because, again, there's a lot of people who liked what the other Democrat politicians had to say when they were inciting violence against cities and buildings and businesses during the BLM movement. So there was inciting of violence on both sides. I don't see anything wrong with Greene liking a few posts that had to do with some other people who called for violence. After all, violence is allowed by the left. So if it's allowed by the left, it has to be allowed by the right as well. And that's my argument for today, is that we're either going to condemn violence on both sides, or it's going to be open game for both sides. But you cannot pick and choose who's allowed to act violently or who's allowed to protest and who is not. So Marjorie Taylor Greene has come out. All she's guilty of here is coming out with saying things like, I don't really know if I believe 9/11, or I don't know if I believe that the Parkland school shooting actually happened. So you better believe Mitch McConnell, he had a lot to say about it. Mitch McConnell comes on, slams the new congresswoman without addressing her by name, which is disgusting, adding that loony lies and conspiracy theories are a cancer for the Republican Party and our country. This is what Mitch McConnell came out and said. He comes out and says, loony lies and conspiracy theories are a cancer for the Republican Party and our country. This is all she's being accused of, for conspiracy theories and loony lies. Since when is that a crime? Since when do we go after people for speaking their mind? And then he goes on, Mitch McConnell then goes on to say someone who suggested that perhaps no airplane hit the Pentagon on 9/11, that horrifying school shootings were pre-staged, and that the Clintons crashed JFK Jr.'s airplane is not living in reality, McConnell said in a statement. She's not the only one, Mitch, who believes this. There's a lot of people out there who believe it. So Green got a hold of this tweet, and she fired right back. Green fired back on Twitter shortly after McConnell's statement. Green said, "The real cancer for the Republican Party is weak Republicans who only know how to lose gracefully. This is why we are losing our country." Phenomenal comeback. Phenomenal comeback. And she's right. She's absolutely right. This is why we are losing our country. Our Republican leadership is not fighting hard enough. Marjorie Taylor Greene has taken it upon herself to fight. Lauren Boebert, Congresswoman in Chicago or in Colorado, has taken it upon herself to fight. A lot of these young guns are fighting. Somebody needs to. Otherwise, we're never going to win another election again. So she is right. She's right by the fact that the only cancer is Republican leadership that is not fighting anymore and is losing or allowing us to lose gracefully. Let's see what the American people have to say about the Marjorie Taylor Greene situation. So Romney says GOP must distance from wacky weeds like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. Bruce says, what happened to government selected by the people, for the people? Since this was supposedly the most honest election in recent history, this must be the person the people chose to be their voice in government. Who, much less other elected politicians, has the right to say that person must be removed? It's exactly what we just said. Why is this Mitt Romney's right? It's not his right. It's not Pelosi's right. It's not Schumer's right. It's nobody's right. We elect the people. Why are we even having these meetings to discuss who should be removed from committees? It's not anybody's right except for the people. Just like in California, there's going to be a recall for Governor Newsom because they petitioned the people to have a recall. So who, much less than other elected politicians, has the right to say that person must be removed? Other elected politicians have absolutely no right to call for any other elected politician's removal. They were all elected by we, the people, and deserve to be heard and represent the people that elected them. Opinions and views don't need to be the same, but do need to be heard and respected as the voice of we, the people. It is a perfect. It's like the only comment we need to even entertain today regarding the situation. There's nothing even else to talk about because he is so spot on with this comment. It's nobody's right. We vote these people in. We don't want them in next time. We vote them out or we vote somebody new in. That's how it works. I don't care what Mitt Romney thinks or Mitch McConnell thinks about Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm not even the slightest bit interested in their opinion. It's not up to them to decide what she says publicly or what she likes on social media, unless it's a crime, an actual crime. So there is no crime committed here. She's just an aggressive Republican that the Democrats don't want messing up their socialist and communist agenda. And if you haven't noticed, they are going after every single Republican influencer, politician, celebrity, social media platform. They are going after everybody that does not support their agenda. That is called communism. That is not how a republic is conducted. Let's take a look at the Keyboard Warrior Cam. A couple more comments before we end today's show on the insanity of Marjorie Taylor Greene being under attack for a few beliefs. Ethel says, he, meaning Romney, has some set to say anything against Republicans in Congress. when, as the rhino that he is, everybody knows he prefers to join in on the other side of the aisle. So he should just shut it off. We do not appreciate his condescending, snarky rhetoric. The only reason Romney hasn't joined the Democratic Party is because it's very unlikely that he wouldn't be put up for a presidential candidate. They already have one for 2024. It's going to be Biden or most likely Kamala Harris. But we all know Romney's a closet Democrat. It's the writing's on the wall. He's done nothing but go up against everybody in the party for years now. And it's only because he wants a presidential bid. That's the only reason. He's whoring himself to the highest voter. Janine says they elected her. She is a representative of the people. If they aren't happy with her, then they can vote her out. It's not for Romney or Mitch McConnell to decide. There are definitely some scum on both sides. Let the people decide. That's what our Constitution calls for. Let the people decide who to vote for. If she runs her mouth, if she gets a little bit too extreme, they won't vote for her again. But until she commits a crime, she should not be in front of any committee or any politician who doesn't agree with her. Because again, they're not her boss. Brenda says, Romney, what have you done about the Democratic politicians like Maxine Waters, Pelosi, and all the others that have encouraged bullying and violence against conservatives and Republicans? I don't see you filing for their removal or impeachment. There aren't countless videos that would confirm their violent actions, or there are countless videos that would confirm their violent actions, yet you have done nothing but support them. Democrats haven't brought toilet paper in this pandemic. They've had Romney to lick their behinds. It's exactly what's been going on. It's the hypocrisy and the double standards of the left that the Republicans don't continue to defend. They allow us to get walked all over. And I'm starting to question their own integrity within the Republican Party and why they're still even there. Maybe term limits is a good thing. Maybe it's something we need to consider in the future. So before any of you keep shaming the right or condemning their First Amendment rights, think. What's happening on the other side? Do a little bit of research. Conduct a Google search every once in a while. Because I hate to tell you, CNN, they're not telling you the whole truth. Thank you guys so much for watching the show today. I really appreciate you joining in. Every day, 3 p.m. right here in Clark Studios, You Made It Political, where we call out the hypocrisy of the left. We keep those sneaky liberals in check. I'm going to bring it to you. I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to break it down. We're going to get to the bottom of this, and I'm going to show you just how outrageous they're all behaving. You guys have a great rest of the day. I will see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. Thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thanks for listening to You Made It Political with Matt Clark. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show, or leave us a review on iTunes. And if you like our show or want to know more, check out YouMadeItPolitical.com.